Imagine this. You have a series that has been going on for 40 years, and you're introduced to two new characters in the seventh film of the franchise. Toward the end of the film, these two new characters duel, and it becomes one of the best choreographed, intense, meaningful, character driven fights of the series so far. No, I'm not talking about Creed, even though that film is fantastic. I'm talking about Star Wars The Force Awakens, directed by J.J. Abrams. Let's begin with the start of the fight, when Finn and Rey are running through the snowy forest and end up getting stopped by Kylo Ren. This beginning exchange is important simply to register the idea in the audience of how injured Kylo is when he begins to hit his ribcage where he's shot by Chewbacca in the scene previous. It may seem a bit superfluous, but in fact it's just visual detail into the disadvantages that Ren has in this fight compared to the uninjured Finn and Rey. It also gives more detail into how he is drawing on the power of the dark side of the Force. In Star Wars mythos, dark side users feed off pain and anger, which many people think has to be mental only, but really it's also the physical pain of the user as well as the physical pain of others. And that's why Ren is pounding his ribcage in order to gain more power from the dark side of the Force, according to the mythos of Star Wars. Moving on, Rey is the first to go on the attack in this standoff, but is immediately thrown back by Kylo into a tree and knocked out. This may seem small, but really it sets up key points for later in the fight. But right now, let's focus on Rey trying to kill Kylo Ren before he even does anything. Rey is previously set up to be a powerful but untrained Force user earlier in the film, with her Force vision and her initial interrogation with Ren. She doesn't really know how to control her emotions with her new powers, and anything in the Star Wars mythos means that the Force amplifies emotions, and that is much more true with anger than anything else. And she is now fueled by anger after seeing her father figure, Han Solo, killed a couple scenes previous by the man standing in front of her with the lightsaber drawn. It's really a drastic shift from how she felt after she shot her first stormtrooper outside of Maz's castle toward the end of the second act. She was horrified by that, but now she just seems to have an eagerness and willingness to kill. Now that the Force is flowing more freely through her, that anger is just amplified and causes her to act kind of out of character even. And this will all come back around at the end of the fight. Now to Finn. He was doomed from the start, let's be real. He's on his back foot for most of the fight, and Ren is pretty much toying with him throughout. It's obvious that Finn has had some combat training, but is nowhere near the level that he needs to be in order to come even close to competing with Kylo Ren. But because Finn is able to slightly keep up with Kylo, we're able to just see what Kylo Ren is able to do with his lightsaber, such as his fancy moves when attacking Finn, or when he uses the crossguard to burn Finn's shoulder. Granted, he's able to get a hit in on Kylo's shoulder, but immediately after that, Ren stops toying with him and immediately disarms Finn and then slashes him across the back, taking him out of the fight. This next part, there's really not much there other than that it's just plain awesome. You think Ren is going to pull the lightsaber out of the snow, and the difficulty is just a reference to the beginning of Empire Strikes Back when Luke is hanging upside down in the Wampa cave. But there's a little shot here that Ren doesn't understand why it's so difficult. And almost immediately after that, it flies into Rey's hand and she ignites it. And thus begins the real fight. What's so wonderful about this fight is myriad. Let's start with the simple thing first. After Rey ignites the lightsaber, she's the first to strike. This goes back to her anger and willingness to kill Ren based on everything that he has done previously. But after that first initial strike, until about the end of the fight, Rey is actually on the back foot or running from Ren the entire time because he is much more skilled with the lightsaber than she is. And honestly, this is very similar to the Obi-Wan Anakin fight in the Revenge of the Sith. Another thing that is really overlooked with this fight, though, is just how natural it looks. Many may think that the fighting was created by the actors while shooting, if you aren't familiar with how filmmaking works. But in fact, this may be one of the most choreographed fights in the entire saga, behind the aforementioned Obi-Wan Anakin fight in Revenge of the Sith, and the Obi-Wan Qui-Gon and Darth Maul fight in The Phantom Menace. The difference between those fights, though, is that this fight looks natural, very ungraceful, and unchoreographed, which lends to the idea that Ren is the loose cannon with his style and you're not sure about what he's going to do. And Rey is not really all that comfortable fighting with something other than her staff, as evidenced by her first couple of movements against Kylo after she ignites the lightsaber. And now comes the defining moment of the fight, when their sabers are locked, while they are standing on the edge of the cliff. There is one thing, though, at this part that is really, really subtle, and I honestly didn't even catch it till around my 5th viewing. In Rey and Kylo's eyes, there are the reflections of the crossed sabers, like how they're supposed to be. Cool effect, and everything is normal, but that's when Rey closes her eyes. Time slows, and you just see the beautiful lighting on their faces. When Rey opens her eyes again, the sabers are now parallel in her eyes, while they are still crossed in Kylo's eyes. This is simply just a very subtle way to show that Ren is still conflicted, while Rey, once she lets the Force in, is finally assured of herself. At this point is where the tide turns. Rey immediately begins to attack Ren and take control of the fight. Very dominantly, too. You can honestly tell Kylo is shocked by this, and he's still able to fight back and stand his ground for a bit, but Rey eventually overpowers him, injures him, and slices him across the face. It's just one little shot, though, of Rey panting heavily, with anger drenched on her face, that you think that there's only one way this is going to end, with Rey killing Kylo Ren. This is where her willingness to kill circles back around. She was being manipulated by the dark side of the Force because she couldn't control it. There is so much to this scene that many people have simply overlooked because it is air quotes popcorn entertainment film. But really, while it is a very well done action sequence and many people find enjoyment in it for all the right reasons, there's so much to it that many people simply don't notice. But in even something like a action set piece in a Star Wars film, there's much more laying under the surface